Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Matt and Andy will be discussing the natural resource and wildlife locator applications. As a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this meetup on meetups.com. During the meetup, if you'd like to make comments or chat with other participants, then use the chat panel. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A panel. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Matt.
Excellent. Thanks, Heather. So as Heather mentioned, we're going to be talking about our new natural resource and wildlife locator applications. And we know we have a mixed audience today. So this will be both I'm kind of doing a state and local approach to this. So we want to kind of on the agenda today, we'll be thinking about or talking about kind of our March release we just released. You'll see some of the applications that were part of that release as well as what we released in January. We'll talk kind of give an overview of what the locators are, what our kind of purposes and how we want to deliver those. And then Andy will go through some demo applications and kind of get into the meat of the applications themselves. I'll talk about the road ahead and what we're thinking about for the future. We have a new meetup feedback survey using Survey123, so I'll talk about that at the end of this, but I want to kind of share that out. So we want to see as we do these meetups going forward, we want to be capturing your feedback and what's working, and if there is anything that's not working, how do we make that better for you? And then we'll actually have questions at the end here, but we'll actually please be fielding questions as we go. I think we'll have a couple question Q&A periods there. All right, so in our March 2019 release, there were several new solutions that came out. There's a long list of things here. Definitely, you can always check it out at our solutions website. We have kind of a what's new, and it kind of goes through in depth of everything that's new and enhanced throughout that release. But a couple highlights here is what we'll show the park locator, which received quite a bit of update. Andy will show that. And then just wanted to highlight a couple others. So like release of our dam safety. So that's something where organizations that are managing dam inspections and related to safety information, they have quite a bit of a workflow there to manage the inspections. So it's a kind of a full suite of inspections for dam safety. And then another one to highlight would be all of the various aspects of election management and outreach and results. So you can always go check those out on the solutions website. And so let's just dive right into the locators themselves. And so thinking about the market, so this could be natural resource departments, wildlife agencies, planning departments. They're all focused on promoting outdoor recreation opportunities to the public. And you've probably been part of or have plenty of these websites that you're either managing for your organization or you're providing content to, or in the case like myself and you guys, when you're going out to plan that next outdoor recreation opportunity, this is usually the first place I'm going to find maps and information and kind of an easy to use format. So the departments that are promoting these activities are modernizing their website experience, making it mobile first, mobile friendly. And we've developed a set of solutions those departments can leverage to kind of bring that modern mobile first approach to sharing that information out to the public. So thinking about some of the challenges that you guys may be facing in your agencies or other folks that you work with. So outdoor recreation activities are revenue generating, so licenses and reservations. So I mean, there's this concept of this is kind of a high profile, big demand for the department. So we really want to make sure that we're pushing out if I'm in that role, I want to make sure I'm pressing out the best opportunity, the best applications to make that easy for the public to engage with. In the case of thinking about because it's revenue generating, we want to provide a good experience. Oftentimes you might have or encounter individual solutions that aren't promoting other activities across the range of the department. So think of a natural resources department or a wildlife department, and actually a planning department as well. Think like what we have for our R3 initiative. So R3 is recruitment, retention, and reactivation. So this isn't thinking about the wildlife space of getting people back outdoors and buying hunting or fishing licenses, but it also may be getting people to go view wildlife or hike and go recreate within a state park or whatever that may be. So these aren't always connected. They have kind of limited impact on internal workflows, maybe other business systems. They might be custom development, so they're difficult to update and kind of make it a little more inflexible to deploy rapidly there. And then us being kind of in that map-centric world that we live in, location is very important, but sometimes it's important to have kind of a mix of ways that people can engage with that information and not just kind of start with a blank map and start searching there. So those are some of the challenges. I'm sure you guys are probably well aware of these. And so how do we, what are we doing on our team to make that better and offering it, what we're going to talk about today? So within our natural resource and wildlife locators, like I said, these can be used by, these are thinking about the user persona. So I'm a member of the public. I want to find outdoor recreation opportunities. So you guys as local and state governments and other entities that want to share that information. So if you're a wildlife agency, you can use the wildlife resource locator to push out information to the general public to locate wildlife conservation or recreation areas to go and recreate in those. If I want to figure out where I can buy a recreation license, so this could be something related to boating licensing, going fishing or hunting. So where can I buy those actual, or the retailers to buy those licenses? For what we call our water resource locator, this would be I want to go out fishing or boating. How do I find those local access ramps or fishing locations? And then finally, with our park locator, you can use this configuration to push information about a park or a facility out to the public. And so with that kind of setup, I'm going to now kick it over to Andy, and he's going to kind of go through an overview of how these applications work. So our wildlife resources, recreation license locator, water, so all of them and how they kind of connect together and work in that manner. All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
So can you guys see that screen there, Matt?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So as Matt said, we're going to kind of dive in here and kind of see what's going on. So we're just going to start off just kind of with that user experience here that your users will engage with. So we're starting off just with the state version of the park locator. As Matt said, we've got state and local versions of this. The data on the back end is the same. The configurations are just slightly different in terms of what fields your users will be able to see and how they'll interact with it. So, like I said, we'll just dive right in. And we're going to start off just with locating a park. So for this demo here, we're going to be living somewhere in this area here, and we know we want to go to a park. And you can see right off the bat, we're already getting, 3 different parks in the area. And we're not too sure where we want to go yet. So we're going to load up these filters here, and you can see what we've got is a whole bunch of different settings that we can filter all of this data by in terms of what's here and what's going to happen. So for today, what we're interested in is, we want to go fishing, so we'll filter our data by that fishing there. And we've also got a boat, so we know we also want to take our boat out, so we'll limit that by boat launches. And you can see we've now got just that one location there that we can get to. So if we go back here, we can zoom in here, and by default, when we have only one selection, the widget will zoom in on that guy and give us some more information about it. What we're seeing in the panel over here is the pop-up for this particular feature. What we can see right off the bat is we've got some great information regarding the operating hours, how we can contact them, where the place is, and then some more specific park information. So where we can make a reservation here at this park, or the website itself, how many parking spaces we've got, a quick little visualization of certain things that are allowed, and then some text information regarding it. Now, as we zoom on down, we can see an image of the park and some more activities that are allowed here. But what we've also got are these links here that gives us access to upsell other activities within this area and areas nearby. So because we're interested in fishing and boating here, well, let's see where we can actually go. Because we know on this map, we can go to this park, but where actually do we need to go to launch our boat and such? So if we click on this link, this will kick us out to the water resource locator. And by default, it will pass in the location of that park where we were just looking at. So it'll zoom us right in here, and it's going to search in that area. And once again, since we only have one response within the designated search area, it's going to give us the closest marina in this case. And once again, we've got really good information here, where it is, the hours of operation, who's managing it, link to the website, and then more information, in this case, with regards to price to get in, the types of boat ramps that are available, and since this is geared directly towards fishing, all of the fish that you can get in the area. We've got more information with regards to rules and regulations, and then, once again, the amenities. But what we also have in here is more information about getting licensing. Boating and fishing are generally not something that we let folks just go out and do without having permits of some sort. So we've got some information on where folks can get their fishing licenses. So they click that link. Once again, we're loaded into a new application, this time the Recreation License Locator. And as we jump in here, we see a very familiar looking site that pop up with the basic information. And what we can see is just right off the bat what there is here. What type of licenses does this location sell? Once again, to get information out to your communities, but at the same time, upsell more information. So we can look at this and right off the bat, we can say, hey, there's hunting stuff in here. And once more, we can link out to another application to tie in and upsell hunting opportunities and wildlife viewing opportunities. Once again, it ties everything in so that the location is still within that buffered area, and we can get some more detailed information about each of the areas and access points with regards to what's available there and what you're allowed to do. So right off the bat here, we can kind of get a lot of information really easily. And we'll just jump right back in here. So before we move on, do we have any kind of pertinent questions or anything before we kind of dive into the hands-on experience on getting these guys configured up there?
So far, there's no questions.
Okay, excellent. Well, in that case, we'll dive into the configuration here. And just to kind of go in, what we'll be looking at on this configuration is three main points. The deploying of the actual solutions and what you're going to get with that. We're then going to kind of dig into the deployment itself, look at the web map, the views, the arcade expressions that we're using to drive all this, and then also how we're linking these apps together, since this is going to be the kind of meat and potatoes of what you guys are looking at in these apps. And then finally, we'll touch on a bit the data loading considerations, specifically the key data that we'd need in these applications that you'd want to kind of gather from your different sources, and then also how we can load that data easily and effectively into the applications. So what we'll do here is we'll just jump straight into the deployment part. So off the bat, this is probably going to look pretty familiar. That's that water access information we were looking at. Once again, looking at the state information. This is just simply the solution deployment tool, which if you haven't downloaded it, highly suggest you do. It'll make your life a lot easier with getting these things going. Once it's installed, you just simply click on the deploy button and it will bring you into the solution deployment tool. In here, we can deploy any of our Esri solutions. And what we'll do is we'll just look at the state version of our fish and wildlife stuff here. And what we're going to do is just deploy this water resource locator. And literally the process is as simple as just pressing that deploy button. And now what this will do is lay down several things for us within our ArcGIS Online organization. When we jump into here, what we've got, you can see I've already got the park locator, and we'll dig into this one while the water is going. But each of these locator solutions lays down a web map, a web app, a hosted feature layer, and the views. Now, the reason we're loading in these views is to give you guys a little more control over the data. The hosted feature layer itself, this guy at the bottom, this park and recreation facilities, this is that editable layer that you can load data into and configure. What the view allows you to do is put a buffer between your users and that data so that you can have a editable version that you've accessed and a non-editable version that they've accessed. You can then change the symbologies and the pop-ups and all of that stuff on the layer view, so that you don't have to worry about users accessing things that you don't want them to, making changes that you don't want them to, and really give you more fine-grained control over that data. So we've got all this loaded into our map here, and we'll just open up this map real quick and just kind of dive in to what we've got here. And like I said, what we're really interested in looking at the moment is not only the layers themselves, but what's going on in the background here. So we're looking at the state version, or the local version, my apologies, at the moment of the Park Locator app. And if we click on these guys, we can see that very familiar looking pop-up. Now, this is where a lot of the interesting considerations that you've got to take into account for the solution come into play. As you can see, we've got some very dynamic looking text up here. All of those X's and checks here are dynamic as well, giving different information for each of our zones. And we've also got the links out to the other applications and text. So the real question that we've got at the moment is, how does this all work? And it's all driven by Arcade. So what we're going to do here is just jump in real quick and take a quick tour of the Arcade that's going on in the background. And we're going to go from the kind of very simple Arcade expressions up to the more complex Arcade expression that we've got, just so that you guys can kind of get an idea of what's going on in here. So in this particular solution, the Arcade is all set up on the pop-up. So if we come in here to configure the pop-up, we'll notice a few things right off the bat. The first is that we're using a custom attribute display. And the second is that we have quite a few expressions going on in here. Now, each of these expressions, like I said, is driving the pop-up itself. So we'll start off with this tent camping allowed. So in our pop-up, what we've got here is, if we look at tent camping, in this case, we've got a red X. When we jump into the Arcade here, the Arcade itself is pretty straightforward. We have a simple if then else statement, which is simply saying if the feature, which in this case is tent camp, equals yes, then give us a check mark, otherwise give us an X. And we can test this real quick just to see what that looks like, and we get that nice red X there. Now, one thing that we've got is, if we look at this check mark and this X, these are both red at the moment. But when we look in the pop-up, the check marks themselves are actually green. And what we're doing here is actually using a second Arcade expression and marrying that with HTML, so that you guys can have a more dynamic look to these applications, so that you're not just met with a big wall of red. So if we scroll down in our Arcade a little bit, you see we've got a tent camping color expression. And what this contains, if we pop this open, is once again just another if then else statement, simply stating if the color is if tent camping is available, then set the color to green and set the font size to 20. Otherwise, make it red. And what we're doing, like I said, is just marrying that in with the expression with HTML. Now, when we look at the actual attribute display in here, we don't really see that coming through. We're seeing our tent camping, and we're seeing expression 2, which gives us our X or our check, but we're not seeing expression 8 here, which gives us that color. And that's because we have to actually go into the HTML section itself. And what I find is easiest with this is just kind of kicking this into a notepad document here. And I'll just drag this over so you guys can see this. What we've done is really made these easy to follow. If you're familiar with HTML, it probably makes a lot of sense. If you're not, I'll just kind of break it down for you real quick. What we've got up here is just that first line that's showing us our expression here. This would be our open and close hours. We're then getting some text in here with regards to the address and parking spaces and that sort of thing. And then we're breaking it down. And this section right here is actually a table, which in our pop-up is this section right in here. So this is set up as a table similar to Excel, where we have a cell here and a cell here. And all we're simply passing is here. In our first cell, we're passing tent camping, which we see right here. And then in our second cell, we're passing expression 2, which is our check or our X. But with HTML, we're passing right in here expression 8, which is our symbology settings for the HTML. So what we're doing here is just taking that HTML and plugging in the arcade output so that we can leverage a dynamic look to the pop-up here. So we've got our color and our checks marks there, but what we're also interested in is the actual application connections. Now, we don't have them showing up in here because this local app doesn't connect to our state apps, but we do have the actual expressions kicked up in here so that we can take a peek at them. And when we jump in here, this guy is a little more complex looking than our other arcade expression here. Specifically, we've got multiple returns, and this is also going to be where you guys have to do a little bit of customization once we deploy these applications. So just to kind of break this down, what we've got down here are 3 inputs that you guys put in to set the application to kind of kick out to where you want it to. We're then using Arcade to just put together a URL, and we're leveraging the fact that a lot of URLs, or all of the apps actually, within ArcGIS Online have a very static format that we can replicate. So we're passing 3 specific items here. The first is the name of the organization where the item is. So in this case, we're going to be kicking out to the water resource locator. So if we look at this, our organization name is State Local Triad. We jump in here and we've got State Local Triad. So that's the same thing there. We're then also passing the actual app ID. And this is the unique identification number that every web application and web map has. All we're simply doing is just kicking the number that corresponds with the app, which is right in here for us, into the arcade expression so that that can get copied over. And then finally, to pass our address, we're combining the full address field and in this case, the municipality field. We're doing this because a lot of towns have very similar names. 123 Main Street can exist in almost any town in the United States. So we're adding in the municipality as well to just make sure that we get that full address covered so that the search works correctly. And then once this is done, all it will do is when we test it is kick out a URL for us that gives us a full app, a full link. And if we just paste that into a new link, you'll see this will paste us right in here. And since this is going to the local app, it's not quite gonna jive right for us because it's up in Naperville. But you can see what it's doing is we've once again linked that app using the org name, the app ID in here, and then just passing the address. So that's how the arcade functions in here and married with the HTML. Now, the next step with the deployment here, after all of this is kind of all in the map and you guys have this looking as you want, there are some considerations to make with regards to the app itself. And so we'll just jump back to that guy real quick here. And you can see the water resource locator has finished deploying for us in here. But within the park locator here, we'll continue just digging this apart before we get back to the water resource locator there. When we edit the application, one thing you'll probably have noticed in those pop-ups is we had that section at the bottom that said activities, and we didn't have anything listed in there. However, when we're looking at our web apps here, we've got these nice little icons down here. All of this is set up within the application itself using the widget. So if we jump in here and go into the park locator widget, what we'll see is a whole bunch of different tabs, and these control the search settings, the direction settings, and our symbology settings. And these symbology settings are the ones that appear at the bottom there. So once again, these are all pretty straightforward. If you haven't used them before, you simply choose the layer that you're looking at, the field that you want it to kick from, and then the value that you want it to have, and then simply just choose the symbol. Then we can also set our filter settings. Once again, same exact thing. You set the filter based on the field, what we want it to say, and then how we want it to look. This is all driven within the application itself. And when you deploy through the solution deployment tool, this is all preset for you, so you don't have to do anything. So Moving back then to the solution deployment tool here, we finished deploying the water resource locator, which we've seen pop up in our organization. We now have to kind of talk about the data itself, because a lot of this information is not necessarily stuff that everybody has hanging around in their office. There are certain things that we've all got, such as location of a place, maybe some operating hours, but other information we don't always have. So this is a big consideration to take in when getting these locators up and running. You can deploy them without all of that information and load the data in afterwards. However, that can kind of be a little tricky since you're piecemealing everything together. One thing that would make your life much easier is just kind of storing everything in the schemas that we have up here, and we know that's not always possible. So what we've done is within the solution deployment tool is made the loading process extremely easy. Within the load data, all we need to do is choose the data that we're going to kick up and then just set the target of where it's going to be going. So if we grab this all from ArcGIS Online, oops, I'll just drag this onto the other screen here, my content, and we go into the meetup, and we choose our water resources layer instead of the view, come in here and choose the water resources. Now, at the moment, this data doesn't quite line up. And this is where having the same schemas as us will make your life easier, but not necessarily be a deal breaker in terms of getting these deployed. As you can see, it's looking through and finding the app items that line up. But we have a couple in here where the data doesn't quite line up. And all we need to do is just jump in here and set the correct value that lines up. And then our field mapping will kick everything up when we append this data in. So that makes this really easy when you've got multiple data sources coming in here. So we can run this, and now I'll start kicking up our water points into the application there. And since we've got everything in here already, most of the entire pop-ups will kind of get working and line up for us, and everything will just start functioning. Since we are using a view, the view that we're using in this particular solution is a joined view, which is new to ArcGIS Online. Essentially what this is two layers that have a join, and then we're making a view of that in ArcGIS Online instead of actually having one feature with all of the information in it. What this allows us to do is have a more dynamic look at the data itself. And we're doing this in the water resource locator and the wildlife resource locator, specifically because of the attached tables. When we look at this, we've got this standalone table called fish. And in here, what we've got is, just as it sounds, a list of fish. And what we can see is the site that it's located at. So this is our relationship class, or our relationship feature that goes between the table and the feature. And we've got a whole list of fish. Now, we know that not everyone has the same fish or animals in their areas. So in order to make this easier for everyone, what we've actually done is made very generic names for these fields and then just given them aliases. So when you guys are appending your data up, when you've got this available, you just need to know my fish 1 is this type of fish 2 is this type of fish, and so on and so forth. And when you then go to ArcGIS Online here and look at the data, within the arcade, there's once again just a very simple change that you can do to make everything function as you need it to. So we'll jump back in to that water resource locator application, and we'll go into the map here one more time. And we'll zoom over to the correct location. And what we'll have in our arcade up here, it must still be loading, but if we configure the pop-up, we can kind of take a peek at this as it's still loading that data up from ArcGIS Pro, is our fish down here. And these are the expressions that's driving that section of our pop-up over here that shows the actual fish. All these expressions do are, once again, a simple if-then statement. So if the fish exists, then display this text. So all you'll have to do is know what you've got for your fish, come in here and modify this, and then everything will just click into place. So that's kind of where all of the meat and potatoes comes in with getting these locators up and running. The deployment itself, when you've got your data in our same schema, very straightforward. You just press the buttons, load it, everything will work. Jump into the web maps here, make a few small changes to the application just so that it's got the right fish name, or if you're using the wildlife locator, the right animal names and such, so that everything will just kind of slide into place there for you. So we'll continue on here, and I'll hand it back to Matt for the road ahead.
All right, thanks, Andy.
Do you want to take a couple questions related to what Andy presented before we move on, Matt?
Absolutely. I want to do a quick summary because we did show quite a bit, and then we'll dive into questions. That sounds great. Let me share my screen here. So I'll just go back to kind of the slide that when Andy was starting that demo, and kind of think about, we saw a lot of kind of in the details of the workflow itself. And so we'll start with kind of the thinking about the solution and what you get. So we looked at it and we saw feature layers and the views that come with that. So these are hosted services, an enterprise portal or ArcGIS Online in this case. We got a web map and we got an application that was configured out of the box, web app builder in this case. And thinking about kind of one of the last steps when Andy was doing that data loading and that kind of the importance of that. So we got into the details of the arcade, and it might be something like, hey, that might take a little bit to get the understanding of. I guess I want to make the point of these are ready to go out of the box when you deploy them in the deployment tool. All of the locators that you saw today are ready to go. Now it's a matter of what specific data within that. So we've provided kind of working with a broad set of users in state and local government to figure out what are the most common data patterns within these types of locator workflows. And so that's something that we've kind of brought to the table as this is a standard that we've seen. And then if you need to add additional or kind of modify a little bit of what will fit best for you, that's a pretty straightforward process within the data itself. And I want to kind of emphasize the importance of, so you have data sitting around, like either in GIS data, location data that you have, or maybe it's sitting in a website. So maybe you have hours of operation, descriptions of a park, activities, maybe it's in the brain of someone that's sitting out in the field, that park manager or that wildlife person or whatever that may be. But the information's there. So it's a matter of kind of capturing that first, getting it into a format that either you already have or you need to kind of aggregate that together. Then we would load our data and match it to what we have as a schema with those best practices, like I mentioned, working with a lot of users. And so what that'll allow you to do, there is some work there, but by doing that, you don't have to worry about going into Web App Builder and configuring the widget and having the amenity show. Those things just work. So really thinking of it from a focus from a kind of a data loading and aggregation side there. So if you do that work up front, the applications, that arcade feeds through. So thinking about some of the arcade that Andy showed of things that you might want to, in terms of the apps working together and linking together, there might be kind of swapping a few textual parameters that you have there. Those are pretty straightforward. When it comes to the arcade where it's like showing, is it yes or no for like that, say I wanted to go tent camping within a park, is that yes or no? That's already done for you. So if you've loaded your data into the tent camping field, maybe yours is camping, but we say tent camping, like those are kind of how you can field match there. That arcade will just work. So I guess I want to make that point. Like we got into the details there, but this is something that out of the box, it'll work once you load your data in. So that's something kind of we added. We wanted to make sure that that's just ready. These are ready to go. So, all right. So we can do some questions.
Sure. The first question is, how do you display the check and the X graphics and the expression when you are editing it? Are they glyphic icons?
So the check and the X are actually just HTML. So within ArcGIS Online, it does recognize HTML. So basically what we did was get the HTML, get the code for it, find it by, using Google, and just kind of getting that item, copying it and pasting it into there. And because ArcGIS Online accepts HTML symbols, it just passes it through there for us.
Okay. Lauren has a question. Are these arcade examples in the getting started or help section, or only inside the solution already?
Currently, the arcade examples are only in the solution themselves. However, we're going to get them loaded into an arcade repo that Esri's got kind of for everything. So we'll get some of those samples in there so that you guys can grab those from GitHub.
And that's a great question regarding kind of the arcade concept. So it's something that is arcade will work across the ArcGIS platform. So we're showing it here in web maps and feature layers. So kind of that hosted view that can pull into the web app itself and the pop-up, but you also can use Arcade and Pro and other things. So as we, across our team, across the government solutions team, we're doing a lot of arcade work to really make the apps kind of extend to the next level and provide that to you as kind of the service from our team. So we're definitely going to be thinking about, and as Andy said, how do we share that better? So definitely from a GitHub side, or we also kind of from a solution side, when we release solutions now, you might have seen it with what we have for our election solutions and with the dam safety as well. So we're providing kind of an overview story map of, so instead of in the documentation, it's a story map that's deployed with the solution itself. So you get that kind of packaged together, and also will be available on the solution site. So really descriptive, kind of a little what we're showing today, but also kind of a little more hands-on to figure out like what is the overview of the solution, and that's something maybe we can put some arcade in there to make that easier.
Okay. Catherine's question is, in prior versions of ArcGIS Online, there was a data dictionary of sorts for the feature classes that were used or deployed. Is there any sort of information still available? And she asks this because she's thinking about how to take their existing schema and migrate it into the schema that we provide.
Great question. And so I'm thinking you're kind of thinking about the parks data set that was part of that information model. So how we've, in particular, because some of the other ones are a little newer, that may not have been part of that you're referencing, but in parks in particular, when we merged and kind of state and local examples, and we've updated this for the March release, we are very thoughtful in keeping the field names and the attributes and the domains of what you're familiar with. So these should map kind of directly across. We've added things to help enhance the application, but that will just be a matter of kind of merging those schemas together. But we were very thoughtful in that process to make sure that what's already been done, if you've already deployed a park locator or another app in the past, that we're kind of make sure those schemas line up for sure. Yep.
To that same point there, if you are just kind of looking for the schemas, you can just deploy the solution and then just look at the layer within ArcGIS Pro and just kind of bring it down, make a local copy, and that'll give you a nice empty schema that you can work with if you're kind of looking at kind of getting your hands dirty with it and really poking at it there.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Okay, that's all the questions for now.
All right. So with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're thinking for the road ahead. So we've covered our various, so the water resources locator, wildlife resources locator, recreation license, park locator. So all of those kind of common themes. We also have a trail locator that was based kind of on an older design. So that's something that is going to be coming in the near future. We're actively working on that, and with this one, where our mind is and where we're kind of moving towards is hopefully into this 3D concept of, so if I'm in particular, so parks and maybe a fishing area may not need that kind of 3D web scene capability, but in a trail, especially for I'm located in our Colorado office, so if I'm looking out and wanting to go hiking, it may be a 1.5 mile long trail, but it gains 1,000 feet elevation. So it's going to be a little bit more strenuous than just you would think, a 1.5 mile trail. So we're thinking, how can we apply the web scene capability within Enterprise Portal and ArcGIS Online? How do we make an app out of that? So that's kind of where we're at now. So you've noticed the 4 locators we've shown today are web app builder. And so those work really well for those scenarios. And we're thinking about another version of that for trails. So that's definitely something to keep in mind and coming soon. We're also going to be integrating we're thinking about how we can integrate this kind of outdoor recreation, so adventure planning, that trip planning concept together. And so this is where, across our solutions, we're thinking about how do we deploy ArcGIS hub sites. And so this could be back to that, what I mentioned for in the wildlife space, but they're thinking about recruitment, retention, and reactivation. So getting people engaged in hunting and fishing activities. But this also could be, how do I plan my activities and coordinate with my local government to do various outdoor activities? So it could be parks, but also could be, some counties or cities, they're large areas, so they might be managing fishing and hunting opportunities within those areas as well. So these are all kind of where we're thinking about, that kind of goes in that state and local government implementation. So you saw Andy showed quite a bit of the state government data side, but the configurations themselves and kind of how we deploy them. Right now, they can be deployed by any of you guys. So if you guys are a local government and want to deploy any of these, you certainly can, and just load your data. The schema will work just the same. But we're thinking about, from a try it live and configuration and deployment perspective, we're also going to be kind of wiring up from a local government side of things too. And then some work that we're thinking about, what we mean for, so like recreational license sales and analysis. So part of that kind of R3 initiative concept would be getting people either reactivated, meaning like I might not have bought a license in the past 3 years, but I have steadily before that. So how do we get those people back engaged? So within wildlife departments, they're thinking about what are the best ways to analyze that data. They have a lot of the information, but how do they get through that? So they can use ArcGIS and some of our configurations when I think about operations dashboard and some of the things to help make that process easier for them. And so something new that we're just starting, and we really would appreciate your feedback, is we have a Survey 123 survey that you can, kind of a meetup satisfaction survey. And so the link is here. I'm going to pop it in the chat in a second. So a short link is links.esri.com/April 2019 meetup. So if you want any device you have on you, you can enter that web address. And actually, in the recording of this, in the description, these all go to YouTube. And so we'll also have it in the YouTube video description there as well, going forward for all of our meetups. And they'll kind of follow this format of the month, the year, and the meetup. So that's something that we'd love your feedback on. Let me go ahead and open up the chat. And it looks like, did we get any other questions as we were kind of talking through that?
Yeah, there's one that came in. Tracy is asking, are all of these solutions for state government currently free? Are credits consumed? And if so, where do we estimate the credit costs?
Great question. So they all are, yes, all of the solutions that you saw today that Andy showed are absolutely free. All of our ArcGIS solutions are free. So you just are, to deploy them, you need, we think of it as this comes with your ArcGIS licenses, right? So when you have Esri software, you get these solutions as part of that to deploy them. And so that part of it, yes. So you as a user of Esri and ArcGIS, you get these solutions. In terms of credits, when it comes, I'm assuming you're meaning ArcGIS Online credits. So thinking about how credits are actually in the components that we talked about today. So the only thing that would even use in that manner, that the credit side, would be your data itself. You could create as many web maps and apps and things like that. The deployment tool is part of that solution, so that's all this. There's nothing there in terms of credit usage. So when I deploy the solution, I load my data. There would be a very minor amount of credits used to load and host that data in ArcGIS Online. If you're hosting it in ArcGIS Enterprise, in your enterprise portal, with a feature layer and a view and just like all the components we have, there's no credit usage, obviously. That's on your own infrastructure. So hopefully that answers the question. It's going to be a very minor credit charge. It's kind of a feature layer hosting essentially, but it is going to be pretty minor. So I've got literally a few credits a month, maybe. You know.
To add on to that, there is functionality which we did not show today with regards to routing in the applications. That by default, when you deploy the application, is turned off. But if you do turn it on and consume one of our routing services, that would consume credits as well. But once again, that's a very minimal charge there. I don't recall off the top of my head the exact exchange rate.
It would be a handful of credits, and those are something like I said, you could, like Andy said, you could have them off. Those are really, Andy searched for a park. He found the park. He wants to get there, so there's a directions tab on there. That's something that's helpful for users, but it also could be easily turned off. So if that's something to concern, again, these are all pretty minor usage of credits for that component. Was there another component to that question, Heather?
Nope, that was,
okay, cool.
That's it. Yep.
Sounds good. So I guess if we're kind of right on time here. If there is any other questions, feel free to type them in or put them into that window. And if not, we certainly are. We have a large community here, so we have that meetup. So you can go and post questions and comments on the meetup. This is the I think we can get to us at GNS. So there's ways to find us if you think of a question later as well.
Okay, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks everybody for joining us. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which will be on Thursday, May 15th, where we'll be discussing all of the new election solutions that Matt touched upon at the beginning of the meetup. Until then, have a great afternoon, everybody.